All right, good evening, everyone. I would like to call our city council meeting to order. It's now 8:01 p.m. on March 6th, Monday, and I would like to start by saying the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you can, please stand. Thank you, everyone. Mrs. City Clerk, can you verify that we have a quorum in City Hall and any participants virtually?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem, we have in council chambers, Councilmember Staff, Councilmember Wolfley, Councilmember Hawkins, and Councilmember Truesdale, and Mayor Pro Tem and Ndebumadu.
Thank you so much. I would just like to add that Mayor Adams is not feeling well this evening, and Councilmember Gardner will be here shortly. All right, so I'd now like to ask my colleagues, do you have any agenda items or deletions, amendments? No? Awesome. Well, I'd like to move on to citizen participation. Ms. City Clerk, do we have any citizen participation this evening? Thank you. I'd first like to call up David Cunningham. David Cunningham, are you here? All right, we'll move on to the next person. I have Mr. William. Mr. Green. Oh, sorry about that. Blind in my left eye. All right, Mr. Green, would you like to come up? Thank you.
You have two mics here. Anyway, good afternoon, Council, and the audience here. I'm here to address the issues for Old Town Bowie. I've been here a number of other times, and we still haven't gotten anything done. We're still very, very concerned in terms of when this can be done, okay? We're looking at the condition of the bridge. It's definitely an eyesore. It's falling apart. It's rusting. It's deteriorating. We just recently had a couple of accidents that had taken place during the rain period just last week. And we've had cars with the impact of those guardrails that has knocked it completely off the base. It's an unsafe situation. The next time we might have the car to end up on the train tracks. I mean, that's how critical it is. The debris from the cars after they have the accident, the auto parts are still left there on the grass area. We have a high density of just grass, period, that's been growing right there on the bridge. And it has not been maintained by the state. It has not been maintained by the county. And the residents that live there on that corner, they are elderly senior citizens, and I wouldn't expect them to go to that corner as far as safety reasons, to go to that corner to try to pick up trash. I don't believe that they're capable of doing so. I have called, I've had a few neighbors to call, but I'm being told that the calls have not been received for the county, for the state, or for the city. Now, they're cutting grass in the park area over there. They're doing a great job. The parks look very good. And on that grass area where the accident's occurring, they've been cutting there too. But we still have a lot of trash and debris there that needs to be picked up, along with those auto parts. In addition to that, we would like to address the sidewalks. The sidewalks were upgraded. It's been more than almost 20 years now. It was nice when it was done. It's not being maintained, and it needs some work on it. We have some original parts of the sidewalk. When the landfill was open, the trash trucks used to park on those sidewalks. Those sidewalks are down into the ground. They're cracked up. They're deteriorating, and they need to be replaced. We're looking at 35, 36 years have gone by, and these things have not been done. We're looking at the lighting, not only on the bridge, but in the community. Some of the lighting has been replaced and upgraded, but those main areas, this is the main highway, okay, that connects 197, 450, High Bridge Road, 564. This is a main intersection, that bridge is. and it's an eyesore. It is a dangerous situation, and we need that to be tended to as soon as possible. So we would like to try to get some of the county council, city council, and some of the state members, try to get them together and try to bring them down there so they can see these conditions. And I'm quite sure we have some officials that's on the road through Bowie and maybe have seen that. And there's really no excuse for it. Some of the residents are very, very concerned and upset about that. I would like to conclude my little small presentation here this evening, and it's a pleasure here that you all took the time out to listen to what I had to say. All right. Good evening, Mr. Gardner. All right, I was looking forward to seeing you today. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. I would like to close out citizen participation and move on to city boards and committees. At this time, I would like to entertain a motion for the appointment of Ms. Nicole Warner to the Education Committee.
Second.
Motion filed.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'd like to move to appoint,
Ms. Nicole Warner.
I'd like to move to appoint Ms. Nicole Warner to the Education Committee.
I'd like to second that.
It's been moved and properly second. Now I'd like to entertain a vote. All in favor of the appointment of Ms. Nicole Warner to the Education Committee, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Ms. Nicole Warner, could you please come forward? Ms. Warner, if you could please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Nicole Warner,
Do swear or affirm
do swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
and that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance
that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance
to the state of Maryland,
to the state of Maryland,
and support the Constitution and laws thereof,
and support the Constitution and laws thereof,
and that I will,
to
to the best of my skill and judgment,
the best of my skill and judgment,
diligently and faithfully, without partiality or prejudice, execute the office of regular member of, state the committee name,
member of Education Committee,
according to the Constitution and laws of this state.
according to the Constitution and laws of this state.
Thank you, Ms. Warner. Congratulations. Welcome to the Education Committee. Ms. Warner, could you please come forward? Ms. Warner? Ms. Warner? Could you please come forward?
Okay, Mr. Warner, this is your certificate of appointment. It's hereby appoints you as a member of the Education Committee by the City of Bowie City Council, March 6, by Mayor Timothy J. Adams. Thank you and welcome aboard. Thank you for your commitment.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Sure, anyone else?
Thank you, Ms. Warner. I would now like to move on to any council announcements. Do any council members have any announcements at this time? No? Thank you. Now I'll move on to the city manager's report. City manager, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council and residents out there. I only have one point I'd like to make tonight. The City Manager's Office has completed the review of the department budget request for fiscal year '24. As you all know, I have to present a budget to you all, I think it's on the 10th of April. So currently, the Finance Department is making the calculations regarding the proposed budget that's forthcoming, and so we should have that ready to present that to you all in due course, so I think on April the 10th. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. I will now move on to entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
I'd like to enter a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. I'll now like to move on to old business. It looks like we do not have any old business tonight, so I'll now move on to new business, detailed site plan DSP 20000301, and I'll turn it over to staff. Mr. Joe Minor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and good evening, Council. I'm Joe Minor, the city's planning director. Before you tonight is actually two applications on the same property, detailed site plan DSP 2003-01 and special exception SE 22006. They're both for the dash-in development, and what I'd like to suggest for council is if you would consider holding one hearing for both applications at the same time, and then make two separate motions, one for each application. That way all the testimony can be incorporated into one hearing.
Are any of the members of City Council opposed to that suggestion by Mr. Minor?
No.
All right, Mr. Minor, looks like you have no objections. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll proceed. This particular property is located in the Mill Branch Crossing development. It's one of the first commercial development sites to come forward. The property is located on the east side of US 301, approximately 1,500 feet north of Mill Branch Road. And what is proposed is a 4,500 square foot dash-in convenience store with 8 fuel dispensers for gasoline and a car wash. Property is about 3.19 acres in the CGO zone, and the property is being developed under the prior zoning, the CSC zone, which is permitted under the county zoning ordinance at the present time. I'd like to point out that the Bowie Advisory Planning Board had a hearing, and unfortunately the chairman was unable to make the meeting tonight, but and he sends his regrets, but the board voted on Tuesday on both applications to accept the staff recommendation of approval with conditions, and that was the motion that was made for both the detailed site plan and the special exception. At the hearing, the Bowie Advisory Planning Board heard testimony from one resident who raised questions about traffic and the type of commercial development and the acceptability of the car wash on that location. Also, we did receive an email inquiry from an adjacent neighbor who had raised questions about the water system used in the car wash, and the applicant's attorney addressed those questions during the hearing. So you have a summary of the Advisory Planning Board hearing in your backup. Again, they recommended approval of the staff recommendation in each case. I can move on now to the specific applications that are before you. The detailed site plan, DSP 2003-01, is for the convenience store and the gas pump dispensers. This is the portion of the site that would include those uses. The detailed site plan criteria for approval is basically that the site design meets the county's zoning ordinance design guidelines and represents the most reasonable alternative for satisfying those site design guidelines. And the applicant provided a statement of justification addressing the criteria for approval. Staff concurs with that justification statement. In our review of the plan, we did find a number of items that needed to be minor technical items that needed to be corrected on the site plan. But I would note that one of the items is carrying forward a council condition on the dash-in facility that was reviewed a month or so ago on the Bowie Gateway property, where council recommended the inclusion of an electric vehicle charging station. So that's condition number 2 of the staff report, and the applicant is in agreement with that. Again, we had a number of conditions that staff recommended to basically bring the plan into full compliance with the zoning ordinance and city's development review guidelines. So we recommend approval of detailed site plan with the 9 conditions that you see on pages 3 and 4 of the staff report. For the special exception application, 22006, the criteria are a little different than detailed site plan. It's criteria contained in section 27317 of the county zoning ordinance. The applicant, again, has provided a statement of justification, which is attachment 3 to the staff report. Staff reviewed that statement and agrees that the statement adequately addresses each of the criteria in section 27317. We did identify a couple of items which we also carried forward into these detailed site plan staff report concerning some of the notations on the plan and the identifying the handicapped accessible parking spaces. So with those conditions, we had 2 conditions on the two conditions on the special exception. Those 2 were included in the detailed site plan conditions 1 through 9, and that would conclude the staff presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minor. Do we have a representative for the application here tonight?
Yes, Mr. Lynch is here representing Dash Inn.
All right, Mr. Lynch, would you like to come forward and start your presentation? Thank you.
Hey, good evening. For the record, Dan Lynch with Maggie Mahosi here on behalf of Dash Inn. I have with me here tonight Ms. Renee Montgomery with the Wills Group and Dash Inn. I also have Mr. Brian Fenwick with the Wills Group. We have our civil engineer, Matt Jones, and then Steve Proctor, who handles community relations for the Wills Group. Before I take you through the detailed site plan and special exception, I'm going to have Ms. Montgomery just do a brief presentation for you, give you a little bit of background on the Wills Group and some other projects they have in Prince George's County and surrounding jurisdictions, as well as some of the other things they've done in the community. Ms. Montgomery?
Do I click on this? Okay, gotcha. So just testing, is that good? Thank you for your time this evening. We've been before you before where we just dove right into the site plan, and I'm thinking about you preferred to hear a little bit more about our company first. So you have heard something about our company. I'd just like to run through those very quickly. I know your time is valuable, but we'll just go through a little bit about who we are. So we are the Wills Group. We've been in business almost 100 years. We are a privately held local company located here in Maryland. We are heavily involved in our communities where we operate. Our philanthropy is only growing. In 2022, we released grants of over $875,000, and you can see over time we've contributed a lot to the community. About 35% or more of those grants were applied directly to ending hunger, contributed to food banks that serve Prince George's County and also the residents of Bowie. We were ranked number 11 in the region by the Washington Business Journal in 2020 for corporate philanthropy. I'm the area real estate manager, and I spend most of my time in Prince George's County redeveloping, revitalizing, and rebuilding existing old locations that we already own. So here's a list of just our most recent redeveloped properties. A couple at the bottom are also under construction or approved. For example, Marlboro, Pike and Upper Marlboro will go under construction later this year. But the point is that we've been here, we've always been here, we're reinvesting in the community, and we only have a very few number of new sites in Prince George's County. Most of it is redevelopment. This is just one example of a redeveloped site in Prince George's County in Clinton, Maryland. And I do point out that we continue to evolve, and provide a higher quality product. So this model I'm showing you, the new one on the bottom, is already outdated for our store, but it is a new, modern convenience store that serves the community well at that location. This is another new location that we built also in Clinton. And again, the model that we're talking about building now is much elevated compared to that. We're continuing to evolve. This is an existing and a proposed site of our redevelopment in Upper Marlboro. And you can see the bottom is the proposed elevation for the new site at Mill Branch. It will be an upscale, full-service convenience store. All our new stores have full-service kitchens, where our philosophy is only fresh ingredients, no preservatives. Everything is prepared fresh on site, healthy alternatives, as well as delicious alternatives. We were awarded the Best Food Service Launch in 2021. Before you ask about sustainability, so I wanted to point some out. We do have in all of our locations low flow plumbing fixtures with automatic shutoff to reduce our water usage, LED light fixtures inside and outside to reduce our energy usage. The car wash that we're proposing is the most efficient way to wash your car. It uses less water than any other method, especially washing your car at home. We recycle 1/3 of the water that's used in the car wash, and all the water is recaptured. There's no runoff from the car wash. It all goes into a closed system. We belong to National Water Savers Association that we commit to promote and continue to evolve with environmentally responsible business practices. We use a predominantly use of concrete for vehicle services to reduce heat, and a predominant use of drought-tolerant native vegetation to reduce water usage. And we will be putting EV chargers at this location as well. It's a larger site, so we have room for more EV chargers. We also have a very active full diversity, equity, and inclusion program. All of our employees, all of them are literally trained in DEI. And we have a director of DEI who's also in charge of the corporate philanthropy. And then finally, just a few things. I know we're going to get into the details of a site plan, which is very black and white, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about the car wash. This will be a tunnel car wash that's basically a conveyor belt system. You'll just pull in and you'll go through on the conveyor wash. It's 8 times faster than a normal car wash. It will be a club membership that will be very economically efficient. You pay 1 monthly fee and you can have your car washed every day if you want to. There'll be free vacuums on site after you get your car washed. And also point out that there are no additional services outside, so there'll be no people milling around the outside doing other services. This is just a straight through. All the operations are inside the car wash. There's plenty more about the company if you're interested. I'd be happy to give you my card if you have any questions about our company, and it's at willsgroup.com. I thank you for your time. I hope I went through that relatively quickly, and now I'll let our attorney dig deeper into the site plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Again, for the record, Dan Lynch with McMahon-Hosey. So again, we're here tonight, as Mr. Meinhardt indicated and Ms. Montgomery indicated, on the detailed site plan for Mill Branch Crossing. This is technically an amendment to the approved detailed site plan for the center. Many of you are familiar with this property, and I'll just try to orient you a little bit here. Is everyone saving the mouse? Because I'm not. Okay. All right, so I'll just kind of orient you this way. So we're located, if you look at the top of your page, there it is. There it is, okay, thank you. I'm not sure why it's not working. Okay. If you look at what I consider to be the right-hand corner of the property, you'll see there the gas pumps. That's basically right there. That's correct. Joe has that. That is basically what we're talking about here tonight. That is the first commercial parcel in Mill Branch that is proposed to be development. All the other properties to our left, you'll see also, those are all proposed for commercial development. As Mr. Meinhardt indicated, as part of the preliminary plan of subdivision for Mill Branch, they have approximately 77,000 square feet of commercial development proposed. And we are the first of that 77,000 square feet of development. We are, as indicated by Mr. Meinhardt, we're proposing both a detailed site plan for the food and beverage store and for the gas, and then a special exception for the car wash. The detailed site plan for the food and beverage and for the gas will proceed first. They undergo different reviews at the county. The detailed site plan will be reviewed by Park and Planning and the Planning Board, and then the special exception will subsequently be reviewed by the Office of the Zoning Hearing Examiner. We are proposing a 3,500 square foot facility, okay? And there will be 2 access points to that facility. One will be off the main traffic circle that's located where you'll see the pointer right now. Okay. And then if you go closer to 301, there'll be an exit only that leads folks back out onto 301 to the only 301 access point to the entire center. That's a right in, right out from US 301. We are proposing access drives, parking, landscaping, and will comply with all other bulk requirements for Prince George's County, either meet those requirements or in many situations exceed those requirements. For example, the parking on site, we're required to have 36 parking spaces. We'll be providing 38 parking spaces as part of this proposal. The drive aisles are usually 24 feet wide. Most of ours are in excess of 36 feet in width. So we're providing a very wide open site, a very modern site. With regard to the food and beverage stores indicated by Ms. Montgomery during her presentation, this will have a full kitchen where you'll be able to order sandwiches, burgers, anything you like from that kitchen. It'll be one of the few full-service food and beverage stores on the northbound side of US 301. So it's going to offer just not your normal convenience goods, but it'll also be able to offer our customers hot and fresh food. Now again, I just want to make sure it's clear because this question came up during the review of this before the Advisory and Planning Board. This site, that is the entire Mill Branch Center, has already been reviewed. This is really the final step in the discretionary review process. It's been through the preliminary plan process where the site is tested for the adequacy of public facilities. And its determination has made that the proposed development for the site, which again includes the 77,000 square feet of commercial, meets the adequacy of public facilities with some proposed road improvements. Those road improvements will be in place be in place or bonded prior to the issuance of building permits for any portion of the development of this site. So one of the concerns raised by one of the community members who came up and testified before the Advisory Planning Board was the site being tested for the additional traffic that was going to be generated. And again, the traffic that would be generated by this use was contemplated at the time that they approved the preliminary plan of subdivision for Mill Branch Crossing. Now, with regard to the other requirements set forth in the zoning ordinance, We will be meeting or exceeding the landscape minimum requirements. We have received some comments from staff, which we're in the process of addressing. But you'll notice that on the right-hand side of our property, we'll be retaining the existing woodland there, and that will be counted towards our 4.7 landscape buffer along our northern property line. We're providing a 4.2 landscape schedule along our frontage on 301, and working with staff with regard to providing a 4.2 landscape strip along our frontage where the site is accessed from both the traffic circle as well as the the right out only exit back onto 301. You'll also see from this site plan that the car wash is located kind of to the kind of to the lower right-hand corner of the site. That's correct. To the left of that are the vacuum stations that Ms. Montgomery spoke to, where those vacuums will be free. To the left of that is the food and beverage store. And then above that food and beverage store are the multi-product dispensers. What we are not currently showing on this site is the proposed EV charging station. We received that request from staff after this plan had been developed, but as indicated during Mr. Meinhardt's presentation, we've agreed to add an EV charging station as a condition of approval of this detailed site plan. Now we get to the architecture again. This is similar to some of the architecture that Ms. Montgomery showed you on the other sites that we're working on in Prince George's County. This is very modern architecture. This building is 19 feet tall. We have the very commercial retail glass front along the building, but we have incorporated a lot of high-end material into the architecture, which include brick, metal panels, exposed steel, and heavy timber wood beams, as well as natural wood siding. We've also included that, and you'll see that's an example of the natural wood siding. And you'll see additionally the wood siding is carried to that corner of the building. This elevation represents the 8 multi-product dispensers that will be located on the site. Again, the EV charging station will be not included in this presentation. That'll be at a different location on the site because if ever you've used an EV charging station, usually requires about 30 minutes time to charge your car. So we're going to have a designated area where someone can pull up and sit and not have to sit in front of a multi-product dispenser to charge. So it'll be a separate location on site where they can charge. And again, this is just an elevation showing the proposed corral for the trash dumpster. Again, the material used in this matches the material used on the building. This elevation depicts the proposed car wash. Again, we're carrying the architecture of the building materials through to the car wash building. And this represents both the front and the back of the car wash building. So with that, again, we believe, and I think staff has agreed, that we comply with the criteria for approval of both the special exception as well as the detailed site plan. Specifically, we comply with 27317 of the zoning ordinance relative to the special exception, and then we comply with 27285B1 of the zoning ordinance with regard to the detailed site plan. The one thing that staff did not note is that part of the criteria of the detailed site plan is that we comply with the specific requirements set forth for gas stations, which is 27358 of the zoning ordinance, and an analysis that is contained within the statement of justification I submitted in conjunction with the application took staff through each one of those criteria and demonstrated how this site meets the requirements set forth in 27358. And with that, we ask this council for its recommendation of approval on this application, and both myself, Mr. Fenwick, Ms. Montgomery, and Mr. Jones are here to answer any questions this council may have with regard to this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. At this time, I'd like to ask staff, is there a public hearing on this item for this evening? Thank you, Madam City Clerk. I'd like to open the public hearing and call Mrs. Rhonda Billingsley to the podium. Thank you, Ms. Billingsley.
Thank you, Pro Tem. Thank you, Council, for having me this evening. You know, that was a really nice presentation that the Wills Group just gave to us here. And one of the things I want to say is I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it because I've lived in this community for over 20 years. And at this point, we have several gas stations within a certain amount of a distance between other gas stations in the community. I don't know if you've seen it, but there was an article several years ago that talked about Prince George's County air and how toxic it is, and how we have pollution in our air. I don't think that another gas station, I can't understand how the application process is, what the process is here. This is not redevelopment, this is development. There are so many other opportunities for businesses to come into this area. We're missing opportunities to develop the area to bring commercial business here. And the best thing that we can do is bring another gas station. Now that we got the gas stations, the tobacco stores, the convenience stores, I'm waiting for a brothel to come down the street from my house. When you start losing your wealthier residents and you see your taxpayers' base start to decrease, what are you going to do then? I think I speak for many of the people in South Bowie. We do not want another gas station in our community. They gave a very nice presentation, very sexy, I loved it. But this is not what we want here. We want real businesses, restaurants that we can go to. We want grocery stores. We have more gas stations than we do grocery stores. We have more gas stations than we do restaurants. We have schools that are failing. That's great that they're going to add to the tax base, but we want sustainable businesses, not more gas stations, not more tobacco stores. How long is it going to take until you realize, and this is probably for the county council, how long is it going to take you for you to realize that we want businesses that we can actually use, that we don't have to go out of the city or the county to use? I spend most of my time in Anne Arundel County or Howard County shopping, not here. I have an electric car. And I have an electric vehicle in my home that there are a couple of electric vehicles in stations in the area. I can go to those. But we do not need another dash-in gas station, convenience store, whatever. That's great that they sell food, but what about a restaurant with tablecloths? What about those things? A business is just not a business. We need a business that's gonna bring us real tax dollars in this community. Again, I do speak for many of the people in South Bowie. We are against this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Billingsley. Since there are no more speakers signed up to speak, I declare the public hearing to have been held. Now I'll move on and just ask staff a quick clarification. Mr. Minor, in the beginning, you asked for two separate motions for council to vote separately on item A and item B. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Minor. At this time, I'll now entertain a motion for, sorry about that. At this time, I'll now move forward to questions. Do any of council members have any questions for the applicant?
I do.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gardner. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Devamadu. Yes, if I may have the applicant come forward, I do have a few questions for you this evening. Thank you again, once again, for coming out this evening. I do have a few questions for you. And in response to Ms. Billingsley comments as well, because I'm always about keeping things modern, neat, clean, safe, bright appearance of things in communities. What I do like is that what you presented today, I agree, very great presentation. I do like the clear view of the glass and just looking through. I understand that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that you have elevation in the elevation that you showed displays the trash dumpsters being covered, not seen from the highway. That is important to me. I hate seeing those sort of things in trash. Now, I will say this, and I want to say, Ms. Billingsley, I totally hear you and understand. I did take a trip up to a couple of your locations that are not in Prince George's County that I was rather impressed with. And, you know, years back, I was having this conversation with someone recently when the former mayor, O'Malley, when he was mayor of Baltimore, you know, his first couple days in office, he mentioned to one of the chief police officers or the chief of police, someone, hey, there's a vacant abandoned car. And they're like, where? He says, oh, find it. So, you know, that day the city went throughout, they found several vacant cars throughout the entire city. Rather than him identifying this one, they were able to correct them all and get them all out of there. You sort of follow what I'm saying there? Okay, so I say that to say, I hear what Ms. Billingsley is saying, and I am concerned that we may be overdoing and overpopulating and overdeveloping. And she's correct. This is not redevelopment, this is development. However, I do understand here in the city of Bowie, and you know, for all of those that are listening at home, we have a number of new residences which are coming online here within the city of Bowie and also outside of the city of Bowie. And if we're going to place service stations or bring them into the city, I like them to see them around the 301, the busier traveled areas, and making them more convenient for our residents. So I'm impressed with your locations that I've gone to see. I was really, Ms. Billingsley, I was very impressed with a particular location. I'm not going to tell you which location. I'm just wanting to dig a little further to ensure that we're getting that same style, look, and feel of that location that I saw and liked. So as I was referencing that, the example there in Baltimore, not telling you where the car is, not telling you where this location is, it was a very well-lit, clean facility. You were able to enter and exit clearly without any confusion. The service station, the EV charging stations, you have I may be telling too much, but you do have a car wash there on site. So and the staff, very pleasant, very clean store. I was impressed because we do have to have, and Ms. Billingsley, we do have to have service stations. We have to have supportive infrastructure for all of these residents and communities that are coming on board. Gas stations are part of that infrastructure, such as our classrooms. I do totally agree with you. Tobacco, okay, they're not here for that, but just reflecting on that. Tobacco shops, not wanting to support that. I'm in agreement 100% with you there. We have to be smart about development and projects that come into our community, and certain products that we bring into the community, they have to, you know, coexist with what's already here, and it has to be a complement. I'm looking for fine, good quality projects to come into Bowie. I love it here. You know, I have recently purchased another property in Bowie, so I have 3 properties here in the city of Bowie of which I own. So I am concerned about my investment. My home's the biggest investment I ever have in my life, so it's important for me to protect that. What I will say, I love the idea, I mean, not the idea, but I love the fact that you are a Maryland-based company, because, you know, you're investing in your community, it's your product. You would not, I would assume and hope that you would not want to roll out something that is subpar. We are a community of which, and your second time or third time out here, we are a community of that we want certain things of certain standards. And over the past years, I will say I personally, and I've said it here, felt from many developers that have come here in front of us have given us a bait and switch, like, here, you know, we're gonna give you this, and then we end up with that. I'm gonna see this project all the way through. I am supportive of it. One of my other questions is directly beside there, because I want other residents to know. So there are questions that I may ask that I know the answer to, but many of our residents at home may not. So I may ask certain questions. So directly beside there, currently at this site, there's an Exxon station. What happens to the Exxon? Yes.
The Exxon continues to operate.
So we're going to have...
In the short term, it is really what you call a gas station. It's a legacy site. There's a small kiosk. There's no place for a lady on the way to work to stop and use nice, clean restrooms. There's no place to
I
run
agree.
in and get coffee.
I agree.
It's not what we're planning to do at all. So it's a relatively different product from what we are.
Okay.
And we would coexist there for the time being.
Okay, I'm going to ask, because I don't, pardon me, Mr. Minor, staff, is the Exxon a part of the entire Mill Branch project?
No, it is not. It's a separately owned piece of property. It's not within Mill Branch Crossing.
So my concern, as Ms. Billingsley was saying, is a number of gas stations. Along 301, I'm looking at signage, I'm looking at everything. It's my opinion when I'm driving down to St. Charles County, you see all defined retail, it's really hustle and bustle, but it's a bit much. It's a bit much. So I'm concerned that the appearance might be a bit off. Mr. Minor, do we know if the Exxon plans to continue to operate if Dash-In is their neighbor? Because it appears that there may be a tree buffer or so, but it appears as though they're not sharing the same lot at all. Mr. Minor.
That's not something that I have information about.
Okay.
It's a separately owned piece of property. They're not in for development now, and so we do not know the answer to that.
Okay. When I mentioned signage, because we did not, at least I didn't see it, and maybe some of my colleagues saw it, or residents at home. How does the street signage look if you're driving down 301? How does that look? I'm concerned if that will be.
How many feet was it? Go ahead.
Oh, no, it's,
I don't remember how
it's
many feet
going
it
to
is.
be a shell sign with the yellow logo on it, and unfortunately, we didn't bring that with us tonight.
Okay.
But that sign will be set
I
back.
have a copy of that.
Give me 1 second, let me just look it up.
It'll be a Dash-In sign.
Okay. And you said 8 EV charging stations?
No,
How many? Did you-
multi-product dispensers, there'll be 6 multi-product.
pumps,
Yeah,
yes.
Eight multi.
2 EV chargers.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Okay, all right. I know that the charging stations are very important. We do have a number of residents that are electric car drivers. Yeah, I'm not one. I will be hopefully in the future, but I'm looking at being concerned about the overall resident and the experience they have here in Bowie. What you did mention to me is that I will say I've heard from some residents that said they like the convenience of having a service station with a convenience store. They like the feel of that. We only seem to have that there at the Shell and the Exxon across from Governor's Bridge Road. Yes, your neck of the woods again. So as you mentioned that, getting out of the cold, someone going in, picking up a breakfast sandwich while they're filling up their car, then hitting the road and then moving on. A nice, clean, bright facility, well-positioned, well-located on 301. And again, I just say, I do appreciate that it is a Maryland-based firm, that it is someone local that we can tap if there are any problems. We can drive right there. I would if I had some issues, okay? And if there are, issues with cleanliness and safety and things of that nature. But I just want to let you know that as you've seen yourself, Bowie is a very a community of family, fun, friends, welcoming, but we do have certain standards. And I believe that you all meet the standards, okay, from your product. And I just hope that we're going to get a really good, fine product from what I've seen of your other stores.
I have full confidence of that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
And I just wanted to point out one of the reasons why Ms. Montgomery brought up the redevelopment sites was just to kind of demonstrate to the council that we're not just in the business of doing new sites. Really, most of their time is spent on taking care of the existing sites that they have.
Okay.
Putting money back into it. Because you'll see time and time again, once someone's there and they've got the business, they may or may not reinvest.
Yeah.
They are constantly reinvesting back in their sites. I think that's very, very important.
It is.
To some of the points that you made with regard to maintaining a fresh site, a clean site, keeping it up to date. And that is how you keep the customers coming back, because
Yes.
you make it a very comfortable place for them to
And well-lit for
Yes.
people to feel safe as well. Okay?
Yes, we have a very state-of-the-art security system with cameras everywhere. It's
Okay.
state-of-the-art, hot, best in the industry.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all again.
Sure.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Councilmember Gardner. Do any of my other colleagues have any questions? Councilmember Hawkins, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. And wanted to piggyback off of Councilmember Gardner. The City of Bowie, we have high standards in our development, and we welcome all quality development. I wanted to understand more about the entrance and exit into the gas station, and then also the traffic circle. So could someone speak to that a little more, please?
You can have Joe bring it back up for us if you can.
Sure.
Okay, we'll use.
That's not the best one.
No, but this, okay. So if you look at the overall detailed site plan for Mill Branch Crossing, again, you'll see the traffic circle there. Let's see if we get this to work yet. No. You see the traffic circle, and that is, you'll see at the lower left-hand corner of the site where you see the black markings on the, right there, okay? So that's the traffic circle, and that's, we'll have full access off that traffic circle into the site, okay, full access. And then if anyone wants to exit the site and they want to proceed north on US 301, they have the option of exiting at that, right there, and proceeding north on 301. So that's basically the main way to enter and exit the site. We'll have 2 points.
And there'll be added, there's an added lane, like a merging in lane that's going to be added to Green Highway, and that's a very wide entry drive to the circle, so it'll be ample to support all the traffic. Also, the circle will allow easy access for the other residents that will be built there and the other commercial, so it will all be interconnected off of the highway.
And my understanding is you had to go to the county, make sure that there was some type of traffic study or something to make sure that this actually is sufficient for
That was part of the DSP for
Yes.
the whole entire project, and how the roads were designed, of course, was in cooperation with DOT.
So this council, as well as the planning board, reviewed the preliminary plan of subdivision for Mill Branch Crossing. And the preliminary plan of subdivision was approved. And as part of that, they reviewed the amount of traffic that would be generated by this site. And based upon that review, they anticipated both the residential and 77,000 square feet of commercial could be adequately served by this site once the road improvements are bonded and in place. So this is part of the 77,000 square feet of commercial that was approved as part of Mill Branch Crossing.
And, I mean, quite honestly, there are quite a few gas stations up and down 301. It's hard to deny that. Without probing too much into your business, can you speak to some of the economics and some of the reasons why you're choosing this location?
We feel that that whole corridor is very underserved for a high-quality product, a clean restaurant-style convenience store. And I actually commute up and down that road, so I'm very familiar with it. The 7-Eleven in Brandywine is like my first chance to stop as I'm heading north. And then I really don't have another convenient, new, modern, welcoming restroom until I get to Crofton. So that's like, I don't know, 12, 15 miles. There are gas stations, but they're not places that I can stop and go in and, you know, get a breakfast sandwich and a coffee and use the ladies' room.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hawkins. Now I'm just going to turn it over to Mr. Mayor Adams. Mayor Adams, do you have any questions for the applicant this evening?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. I just want to ask a quick question, and that goes back to talking about the environmental impact and those kind of things. Could you talk about the technology, the modern equipment, if it will be, that you will be using for your pumps in general?
I'm going to ask our construction project manager, Brian Fenwick, to assist me with that answer.
Just identify yourself.
Brian Fenwick, Senior Construction Project Manager for the Wills Group and Dash In Food Stores. So could you repeat your question again, sir?
And so I was just asking, when we heard one of the citizens concern about environmental impact and other things, and we know that the technology has come a long way from the old pumps, and I just want to make sure that we'll have the latest and greatest and the newest technology in the pumps that will be put in there, and I want to know if you could share your insight on that.
Yes, sir. So the multi-product dispensers are just that. So we have 2 dispensers which will be 4 product, and 6 dispensers which will be 3 product, all of which will have capabilities to accept mobile pay, Apple Pay, where you can touch the screens to pay. Additionally, going back to the underground storage tank systems, the tanks are going to be state-of-the-art, brand-new tanks, larger capacity, all new product piping, which is the latest environmentally safe and long-lasting underground storage tank piping. So overall, the fueling experience we feel will be much more quicker and efficient and able to accept many different forms of payment for our customers, consumers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Adams. At this time, do any other council members have? Councilmember Esteb, please go ahead.
I don't really have a question for the applicant if you guys want to make yourselves comfortable again. I did just have one quick statement to residents, though. In the last few years, we've heard more about business quality from the community than I think we've heard in a very long time. And I know these are conversations that aren't just happening in Bowie, but are happening all over the place. I got relatives in Georgia and Florida and New York and the Midwest and California. And you get onto next door in those communities as well. I mean, you could cut and paste the comments from one community to the next. You're seeing a kind of a loss of a lot of independent small mom and pop shops and retail, and you're seeing an explosion in chains, in Amazon, in distribution, in gas stations. And so this is a national phenomenon. What I can say is I've spent a lot of time on the phone with, in particular, small minority business owners in this area in the last year, and I hear kind of the same things from all of them, which is, our margins are low. So if there's uncertainty, if there's challenges, if there's not enough customers, that kills us. We don't have corporate, we don't have, the backing of, a national franchise program or whatever. They're just much more vulnerable. Smaller businesses are much more vulnerable. Gas stations are crazy resilient, especially when they sell food. They're very, very, very resilient. They're basically recession-proof in many cases. A lot of these other stores that are moving in, public storage, is for all the growth in public storage, those things are at like 90% full just about everywhere. Even though there's new ones being built all the time, they're basically recession-proof as well. They're very resilient. So, I mean, there's reasons why we're seeing more of these kinds of businesses. But the number one thing that I hear from everyone who's currently in business is the best thing customers can do is to support the businesses they want to see more of, whether they're in your community or just adjacent to it. At the end of the day, I had one business owner tell me the other week, he's like, if next door comment sections were money, we'd be fine. The problem is we don't survive on next door comments, we survive on dollars. And so the number one thing you gotta do is if you're serious about supporting a certain type of business in the community, go out and spend money on them. And not just, once a year at a nice restaurant for dinner, go out once a month. And if you find that you don't have the budget for that, okay, fine. But don't expect other patrons to keep businesses alive that you would otherwise like to see if you're not willing to go out and support them yourself. That's just my one piece of advice for customers who want to see more of a particular type of business. Other than that, I appreciate the applicant's time and appreciate being here tonight.
I couldn't agree with your comments anymore. You're absolutely correct.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Estev. I have a couple questions. My first one is for Mr. Minor. Joe, could you talk a little bit about CB 45 in relation to this particular application?
CB 45 was a county council bill which permitted by right in the CSC zone a gas station, a food and beverage store in combination with the gas station. It also allowed apartment housing for the elderly and multifamily dwellings within the CSC zone. So it was a text amendment approved by the county council in 2019, which allowed those additional uses in the CSC zone.
So just a follow-up question for you, Mr. Minor. Is it safe to assume that the gas station that was included in CB 45 is this gas station that we're discussing this evening?
I do not know the answer to that. I believe,
Not premeditatedly, like
Yeah.
essentially this would occupy that part of that text amendment.
it is using that text amendment in order to develop, yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. So I think that's helpful context. So just for those who are unfamiliar, back in 2019, the county council did approve CB 45, which was a zoning text amendment that allowed for this particular parcel of development to include a gas station, a food or beverage store in combination with a gas station, apartment housing for elderly or physically handicapped, multifamily dwelling units, at a maximum density of 45 units per acre, residential townhouse dwelling units at a maximum of 20 units per acre. And a detailed site approval was required for this. And essentially, all of this was CB 45. So I just want to add context to share with everybody that the county council did approve this zoning text amendment back in 2019. So what we're really discussing here is a detailed site plan of something that essentially was already approved at the county level. And so our purpose here tonight as the city council is to ensure, I mean, yes, members of this council can oppose this development and could say, hey, I don't want to see it. However, it is still going to come irregardless because of CB 45 and the current laws that exist. So I do have a couple questions for the applicant, but the point I'd like to make is if you would like to see a change in the process, the laws need to change to support that change in the process. Our disapproval of essentially detailed site plans will not change that process, particularly at the county level. And so I'm not here to tell residents, or I don't want to add this sense of essentially defeat or this concept that we don't necessarily have a ton of authority, which we don't. But what I am saying is the laws need to change in order for the trends to change. And we don't have the jurisdiction of those laws. So I just want to be clear about that. My question, I have a couple questions. The first one is for the applicant. When you talk about redevelopment, what does that actually mean? In the first initial presentation that you gave in the very beginning before you got to the detailed site plan, you talked about a number of different units that you were redeveloping. So can you help us understand what that means and basically talk a little bit more about how you time redevelopment? Is there a particular time frame, like let's say X amount of years pass, and then you go look at that development or that parcel of land that you already own and essentially try to redevelop it? Like, what are the standards for that?
I think we both feel that, but let me just start with regard to redevelopment as opposed to development. What we're talking about here today is what I can see be development, because you're taking a piece of raw ground and coming up with a use on it, as opposed to, for example, where you take a piece of ground that's already been developed at one time. Whatever's on there is either closed or is old. You either tear that down or you renovate it in some way and you redevelop it with either the same use but in a new building or different use. So you come up with something different than what was there before, either in terms of the use or in terms of the building on the property. That would be considered redevelopment. And when Ms. Montgomery was taking you through her slides, she was showing you sites that we have worked on where we've actually redeveloped existing gas station sites and, for the most part, have raised the existing building on the site and have built the new modern station with the convenience store. in many situations, what you'll see is that, for instance, a lot of those older stations either had auto repair facilities or had very undersized convenience stores that were basically made out of the area that was once occupied by the repair facility, but they just started from scratch. In other situations, we not only take the existing property on which the station was located, but if they can, they'll also incorporate an adjacent property into that, so they have a larger area to develop. Because one of the things that I have seen, and I know Ms. Montgomery has seen in her years of doing this, is that you can't develop a lot of these sites, whether it be a gas station or a fast food restaurant, or some of these single-purpose sites, the way you could or were expected to do back in the 70s or the 80s when they were developed, because a lot of our regulations are more stringent. The parking requirements are greater, the setbacks are greater, and also the customers, what the customers expect from the sites, as was mentioned with regard to being very open, very well lit. So you're looking to put your use on a larger site. So if you can, in many situations, you'll purchase an adjoining property and incorporate that into your redevelopment area. Now, with regard to the timing of that, I'll leave that to Ms. Montgomery. She's better at that than I am.
Well, I think we're constantly looking over our inventory of older stores and looking for ways to improve them, looking for places where the population is growing, the infrastructure is growing, how we might be able to modernize the facility. Is there property available next door? And then we would assemble the properties, tear down the old outdated product and build something new that serves the community in an expanded, new, modern way. So we're constantly doing that at all of our locations, looking for ways to better serve the community and honestly, even to maintain our existing sites, even if, like Dan said, the space is too small. We can't tear it down and rebuild it because it's not big enough. We're always maintaining our infrastructure and our tanks and replacing our pumps, replacing our tanks, and maintaining our inventory. We take a lot of pride in doing that.
Thank you so much for that answer. I just want to follow up on another point that you made earlier. Can you give examples of your philanthropic work that you've done in different communities?
Well, I do know that we're working on a new project at Tanglewood, which is down the road from a store that we recently assembled property and replaced on site in Clinton. So we have two main pillars. One is to fight hunger and children that are hungry and families that are hungry. So we contribute to the food bank and contribute to lifestyles. And I think there's probably like 75 or 80 different groups that we're constantly providing grants to. But one of our other pillars is also to improving outdoor spaces. And I hesitate to say that Jim Proctor might be able to answer more of those projects, but I know we do pay also our employees to paid time off to go contribute in community beautification and outdoor spaces.
Thank you so much. Another question for you. Can you speak to Councilmember Hawkins had talked a little bit about, I guess you would say, your market analysis that you do in determining when you go to a location and why you go to that location. Can you speak a little bit more to essentially what essentially is attracting you to the city of Bowie, and when you did your market analysis, to the extent that you can speak to that, because I know it's proprietary information. When you did that, kind of what made this an appealing place to warrant such a growth expansion for you?
I think it's an underserved corridor for a new, modern, convenient store that has full service of food kitchen, nice restrooms, and a nice place to stop. There's lots of gas stations, but they're not the product that we're offering, and we feel like the corridor is underserved. We've been continuing to evolve our product. I mean, almost 100 years in business, we're successful, and I think that our experience led us to this site as being a part of the 301 corridor that was underserved.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. And then the last question is around it's going to be around the actual architectural design. Can you speak to a little bit more about your criteria and what your process looks like for determining that you meet certain accessibility requirements and that you actually are going above and beyond to accommodate those with disabilities when they are essentially driving into your establishment, coming in, when you focus on this outdoor type of component, kind of what are you looking for to determine what you need to do to meet accessibility requirements and even possibly go above and beyond to make it more of a welcoming space for those with disabilities?
Well, I know we meet or exceed all the ADA requirements at all of our new locations. I know the parking spaces are right up front, the closest to the front door. I know that the access into our store is very easy. We have the new restrooms that don't even have doors with the, I have a friend who is ADA who tests our product and says that we have very good accessibility. I probably know less about the construction and ADA than maybe my construction here person might be able to answer that better.
Yeah, appreciate that, Renee. Mayor Pro Temp, so from an ADA accessibility, I think Dan talked a little bit earlier, our access ways coming into the property is wider to allow vehicular movements to be much more freely on the site plan. As Renee had mentioned, we do have handicap parking directly in front of the store, the closest to the entryways into the facility. We also put in manual buttons for individuals that cannot access the doors. You push the button, the doors open automatically. And then when you're inside the store, we also adhere to all ADA requirements within as well. So we make sure that we have the appropriate ADA compliance, not only for our consumers, but also for our workers as well. So even if we hire individuals that have those needs, we provide those opportunities and being able to not only from a consumer standpoint, but from a worker standpoint as well. So we ensure that everybody can move freely and without any impediments in regards to ADA. So.
Thank you so much. At this time, I'd like to concur with a lot of Councilmember Estev's points from earlier and just really add in. Our city manager did a great job of sending us a report last week from a company called Street Sense. Essentially what Street Sense does is they look at economic development that's happening across the United States and other areas of the world. And in that report that we got, they identified 5 top trends that were driving economic development growth and revitalization of economic development across the United States. One of those big components was outdoor community dining. That was one of the components. The other 4 areas, I may misquote them, but please bear with me, and I ask for forgiveness up front, was really educational models, wellness, holistic types of institutions, and other various destinational points. And so the reason why I highlight that is because although that we're hearing from Dash-In this evening, and Dash-In is essentially partly a gas station, it does meet that community outdoor component that is fueling and driving economic development. When we talk about economic development in this city, it's a much bigger conversation than just this detailed site plan tonight. It's a much bigger focus that we are looking to have, and I think all of my council members have been having these conversations over the last couple of years, over the last couple of months, and our staff has been working pretty diligently. And later on this evening, you'll see there are other agenda items that are centered and geared towards economic developments, like our plans to try to organize a roundtable, because this is a bigger conversation than just a Dash-In or just a convenience store or just a dine-in. We're talking about economic development across the city of Bowie. However, what I do think is important to note here, These are the type of community partners that we need in our city. We have Exxons, we have Shells, we have all of these other gas stations that essentially are not doing anything for our community today. They are just destination points for you to pump your gas and leave and continue down the 301 corridor. Dash-In is not that. They are not an example of that. So while I agree, I personally would not like to see more gas stations come to the city of Bowie, and I find myself in a very difficult position supporting this, I do believe that they are a great community partner, and they will be a great community partner. You talk about hunger. We've got a food pantry. It would be interesting to see ways to partner. How can you support our food pantry and pour back into our community while we are asking and driving expectations of our community to pour into you? I do think some other examples that are really important to note here are really securing a seat at the table. I talked about CB 45, this particular parcel was already approved. So when asking council members to vote no on a detailed site plan, which is more focused on architectural design, to be fair, and making sure that it meets the letters of the law when it comes to the architectural component, the design, and things of that sort, it doesn't do anything, and it honestly does not give us a seat at the table. We approved and are probably disapproved many of these other developments, and we have no partnership with them whatsoever, and they are getting so much from our community, and we are getting nothing in return. This is an opportunity to, number one, signal that we are looking to do something very different, have the right community partners, have the right businesses in the city of Bowie that are willing to invest in our community and explore different types of philanthropic partnerships to make sure that we have a sustainable community. I also think the examples that you provided this evening around how you have other stations or other parcels of development across the state of Maryland, you also proactively look at redeveloping them. I have never seen other gas stations who do that. We have multiple gas stations that are degraded in our area that are not doing anything to reinvest in them, and they probably won't. And so to see that you're proactively, consistently looking at that and you're trying to fix it is a great example of a good steward to me. And so I really think the conversation about development is a much bigger one than just this detailed site plan that, believe you me, I'm very aggressive on tackling, because as somebody who is in her 20s who wants to continue to live in the city of Bowie, we really want to make sure that we have the quality of development here that will sustain a future for many of our families and make this a place that people want to continue to live in as they matriculate in their lives. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion from my colleague. Would anyone like to make a motion on
I would like to do
DSP
that.
2003?
Yes, I would, Mayor Pro Tem, thank you. I'd like to move that we approve detailed site plan DSP 20003-01, Dash-In Mill Branch Crossing on all the reasons that you just spoke of, Mayor Pro Tem and Devamadu. Very well said.
A motion has been entered. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. At this time, I'll entertain a motion. All those in favor, I'm sorry, not a motion, a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same favor. Motion passed. City Clerk, do you have the votes? Okay, thank you so much. We also do need to, and at this time, I'll also entertain a motion for item B, special exception SE 2-22006.
Yes, I'll do that as well, Mayor Pro Tem and Devamadu. I'd like to motion to move for approval of special exemption SE 22006 Dash-In Car Wash at Mill Branch Crossing.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor, please respond with aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same favor. Motion carries. Thank you so much for coming out this evening.
Thank you for coming out this evening. Thank you.
At this time, we are going to move over to agenda item C, Economic Development Activity Impact Brief. I'd like to turn this over to staff at this time.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem Council. I'm John Henry King, the Economic Development Director for the City of Bowie. The question before us was asked by Councilmember Hawkins. He wanted an economic impact of the incentive payment made to Inovalon. The simple answer is it accomplished to date the objectives for which it was awarded. Let's go back in history. In 2016, Inovalon provided us with notice that their lease was expiring, and they were looking for sites other than Bowie. At that time, Inovalon was our largest employer, private sector. It remains today our largest private sector employer. After consultation with council, staff was directed to embark on an effort to retain Inovalon. In 2016, there was no success in reaching any agreement with them, and in fact, they aborted their search and restarted it in 2017. In 2017, we were able to negotiate with them an agreement to stay in return for an incentive. And we offered them an incentive of $1 million to remain here in Bowie for at least 10 years and to maintain an employee count of 500 or more. That incentive was to be paid in increments of $100,000 per year for 10 years. The fifth incentive was paid in the fall of 2022. So to date, we have paid $500,000. While I cannot reveal specifics of the amount of tax revenue Inovalon has paid to the city, I have confirmed with the finance director that revenue received from Inovalon being located in the city exceeded our projections, and we have received a net positive revenue because Inovalon has remained. The decision to provide it was not made in a vacuum. Going back even further than 2016, in 2011, the then sitting city council established the Bowie Economic Development Incentive Fund. It is an incentive fund that exists by council adoption. It provides a set of specific criteria under which we can consider an incentive, but as a final safeguard to ensure that it is not used without full council and public involvement, the fund contains $0. So anytime an award is considered, in addition to all of the discussion about what is the appropriate amount, there is a final discussion that must be made in public for council to appropriate that funding. We have used that provision twice. The second instance in which we used it was to attract FTI Consulting, which is also one of our major employers. They are located at Melford. We provided them a grant of $50,000 upon their signing their lease. And we forgave, that grant was repayable to the city if at any time in the first 5 years they were here, they left, or their employee count dropped. Last year they completed their 5th year, they maintained the employee count. And again, without revealing numbers, the amount of money we spent was more than returned to us in revenue received because that company was located here. Mr. Hawkins, did you have additional questions to amplify what you're asking about?
Mr. King, thank you for this analysis. It's greatly appreciated. First question that I have is, could you dive a little bit more, maybe staff could, or why can't we understand the revenue generated by this incentive?
I will ask our city attorney to explain to you what she helped me understand as I was seeking to get the answer.
The tax property article contains a provision prohibiting the disclosure of individual tax information.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Just a question, Mr. King, does that conclude your presentation?
It does.
Thank you so much. I'll ask my colleagues if they have any questions. Councilmember Wolfley?
Yes, thank you, Madam. City Attorney, a quick question for you. Does that restriction or that limitation apply to individuals? That about revealing tax burdens or taxes paid, is that to individuals or any?
Any taxpayer.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Wolfley. At this time, Councilmember Gardner?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Ndevamadu. My question is for Mr. John King. John King, could you explain to our audience and maybe some of our colleagues here how, well, for lack of a better term, the trickle-down effect of what the impact for the greater having an Inovalon and you said, I'm sorry, the other group, FT Tech, I forgot the other, over in Melford, FTI. I do know completely the history of this relationship, but as I said earlier tonight, I ask questions so that our viewing audience or our audience here in public understand some of the questions. So my question again to you, if you would explain to our listening audience and my colleagues and people here in the audience, the trickle-down effects of having an Inovalon here in Bowie and during lunchtime and so forth.
I'm going to go Reagan-esque on you. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, there you go. Reaganomics.
We'll channel Laffer and all that. Can't do that. It's very simple. Inovalon is the largest employer. In 2016, if you went out there during a lunch hour, you would watch their employees streaming from the building to Bowie Town Center and shopping, eating, and going back. Had they left Bowie, we would have instantly removed a huge customer base for Bowie Town Center. That's something we didn't want to happen. We wanted to keep Bowie Town Center strong. The second thing we have is a vacant building is worth less than an occupied building. Our revenue stream relies on the assessed value of real property as one of the major sources. So the more valuable a building is, the more at which it will be assessed, its assessed value will be set as the state process goes ahead, and the more money we get from it in the taxes we collect. Likewise, if a building that is highly valued today vacates tomorrow, owners can go to the state and argue that the assessed value should be lowered because the real value has lowered, and when successful in that, we would get less money. We don't want less money. We want to maximize the amount we are legally able to collect from our real property taxpayers in the commercial sector, because that allows us to maintain a lower tax burden on the residents. And that's what we did, particularly in Inovalon's case, because it would have gone from a fully occupied building to a barely occupied building. There were two other small tenants that comprised about 1/4 of one floor. The FTI Consulting is a different one. Melford's office towers have always been challenged in attracting tenants. Their flex product, which the flex building is the one-story product, office tower, obviously the towers. The office towers have always had to compete with similar quality but slightly older and slightly less expensive alternate locations near the Beltway. Council wanted to see the office towers at Melford occupied. And one of the things we offer within our incentive fund is for a company with 100 or more employers, we'll talk incentives with you. We don't have a specific package, but we customized it. And that's what we did to ensure that a large tenant occupied some previously vacant space in one of the Melford office towers, thereby stabilizing its value, thereby stabilizing the assessed value, and ensuring we have a valuable property to collect our property tax from. And that's it. It's very simple. We're not trying to do fancy legerdemain or, magic tricks, smoke and mirrors. We're connecting it directly to value that we can measure on our books, albeit under the protection of the state law. We can't specifically say, when we gave that grant to Gardner and Hawkins Incorporated, Gardner and Hawkins Incorporated paid us this number of dollars. But we can look at these cases and see that, yes, we received more taxes back than we spent there. You will note a particular attribute about these two incentives is they were self-liquidating. We did not have to dip deeply into a fund balance in order to get this money and wait for some distant point to get back. Within the first 2 years that FTI was here, we believe the value we received more than covered the single payment of $50,000. And we know that each year the assessed value of a company that occupies as much space as Inovalon occupies generated more business personal property tax than the $100,000 we paid in a year. And that's the kind of thing we're looking at.
I'd like to add two other things. One, the jobs involved are high-paying technical jobs. So these are people who could afford to live across the street in an apartment complex, the Bowie. As you all know, the rents are substantial, but worth it. And also, these people could afford to buy properties in District 3, District 2, and around because they were high-paying jobs and that were very beneficial to us. Thank you.
Councilmember Wolfley?
Thank you for the opportunity. Just a quick comment. I'm not here to relitigate. I certainly don't want to do that. I do want to say, though, that at the end of the day, each one of these opportunities needs to be evaluated in their own right. And ultimately, one of the things that's ambiguous in a lot of instances is not whether or not the tax benefits or the benefits, the secondary benefits to the community are greater than the incentive provided, but what would happen without the incentive? And I think that that's where the real question is, which is kind of that poker game. And my personal feeling is I think Bowie has a pretty strong hand, and oftentimes, once again, without going back into specifics, oftentimes I think our hand is strong enough the way it is, and that a lot of times we will get the business regardless of whether we offer up an incentive. I know, although it's not related to this, we had that issue with the tax increment funding for the property down at South Lake. That was a different sort of arrangement, but the scenario was the same. We provided tax incremented funding. It was my sincere belief that that had zero impact on whether or not they were going to develop that property. They were going to do it regardless, and so we just gave away money. That's one situation, and the other is if it's a company, they're coming in, you don't know what their internal costs are, you don't know what the cost of moving is. It's really an assessment that one does, and I think it's really kind of dicey when we're going down that path. And so I think that to the point that There is no money in the budget for it. It has to be funded in the public, in the open. I think that helps. That having been said, and generally speaking, I'm not fond of these sorts of things. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Wolfley. Do any other council members have any questions at this time? I just have one question. Mr. King, at what point do we reevaluate this essential relationship with the Noblon?
Good economic development practice suggests that we keep in touch with them every year. And we really get serious when their lease is getting close. And in a large company like that, that means about 3 years away from the end of their lease. So sometime in about 2025, we would expect them to begin assessing their real estate needs and looking, and we want to understand what they need, what their options might be, and we go from there.
When do we evaluate essentially the ROI on this relationship, and what metrics do we use to determine that?
As the relationship is a very simple one, the ROI is judged each year. Are they still here? Yes, it's a yes or no. Do they have more than 500 employees? Yes or no? It's been a yes. That's it. Those were the objectives we set out for in the document, and perhaps rather, as many of you were not present for it, and this document is more in a file now than in your immediate reference papers, we'll send this out to you so you can see the steps that were taken for it. For the public that would like to look it up, it is available through our online resources. It is Resolution 24-18, and it lays out and gets packaged all of the things that were considered and what we were hoping to accomplish for it. Likewise, if you'd like to read more about the incentive fund and how it is envisioned and its rules for use, that is in Resolution 56-11.
Thank you, Mr. King. Does staff have any other comments on this agenda item? No? Any other council members have any questions for staff? Alrighty, at this time, we'll move on to agenda item D. I can kick that one off if that's helpful for everyone. Alrighty, so essentially, just a brief background. Item D essentially is South Bowie Revitalization Committee. I placed on the agenda the objective to establish a revitalization committee comprised of South Bowie residents and business owners to come up with clear metrics and goals for revitalizing South Bowie. Earlier this evening, you heard from a community member that speaks to many other members of the South Bowie community in regards to the wants and the desires and the needs of the South Bowie community. And I do think as we look at many of the shopping centers or many of the development projects that are going on in South Bowie, it's really, really important that we have an active say and get a little bit more proactive as a council as well as a constituency in that process to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our residents and that we're actually working with these developers in a much more closer manner. So essentially, what my objectives for this committee are is the committee will identify desired revitalization areas in South Bowie and spend time prioritizing which neighborhoods in South Bowie could be targeted in addition to our economic development priorities. This group will think through the current challenges that are facing South Bowie, because we hear about these challenges a lot, but it would be really nice to get very concrete and clear on what exact challenges that the constituency feels is facing South Bowie, the types of businesses that the community would like to see located in South Bowie, the types of retail that's currently located in South Bowie, and current land use permits that are essentially in the pipeline to create an effective plan for our potential path forward. I did propose that 2 members of the council that could liaison this committee would be myself and Councilmember Hawkins and Councilmember Gardner, if he would like to step forward as an at-large member. And essentially, that is my proposal, and I don't necessarily know if staff has any questions or comments on this agenda. Okay, I can turn it over to Mr. King to ask a question and then turn it over to my colleagues.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, you speak of South Bowie. That's not a specific geography to me. District 4, District 3, south of 214, south of Mount Oak Road, those are specific geographies. What part of Bowie do you envision when you call South Bowie?
For this particular item, I'm referring to District 4.
Okay. Secondly, this is right in the area that was contemplated when council set up their Economic Development Committee. So rather than establishing a separate infrastructure, would you consider making this a council assignment down to your existing Economic Development Committee? They are most often puzzled why they don't get more tasks from council. They beat up on Mr. Gardner quite frequently, say, why don't you bring us something? That's most of the things you don't have one. This is one that seems like it might be precisely how that's envisioned.
I think that's a wonderful suggestion, and quite frankly, why you're here. I think that's great. I definitely think so. I think what I'm trying to accomplish here is to give the constituency that's in District 4 that really does want to have a more active part in development that's going on in District 4, an opportunity and an avenue to do so. And I know with the Economic Development Committee itself, essentially we may not be able to have 40 members of South Bowie join the Economic Development Committee. That would be nice if you would be willing. So if there is an opportunity for them to take this on as a task, I think that's wonderful.
If council were to assign it, I'm pretty sure they would approach it just as they've done in Old Town Bowie. They've find the groups from the community, invite them in. They go out physically into the community and assess for themselves. They work through it. It's not something that can be done in 1 or 2 meetings, I don't think. But it's something they could do. And I mean, an outcome of this, I don't see being much different than the recommendations they've recently made to you on Old Town Bowie. It's some things that they have thought about. Clearly, you've given them some guidance here to get them started. And I know there'd be one of the first things they'd want is a sit down with you folks, the council, say, could you tell us a little more about what you're expecting? So that's an option I would offer to you. And as much as I'm going to have to fight off a chairman and a vice chair, say, why are you changing our schedule? I think this is an excellent use of existing resources and a good task for that body.
Well, Mayor Pro Tem, I think if you were to take the specifics that you were reading, that stipulated what your objectives were and what your intentions were, and in a meeting with the chairman and his team, and present that to them, after, of course, the council votes on giving the assignment, then that would give the Economic Development Committee an opportunity to tackle that, and you wouldn't have to reinvent this. And so I think that is probably the best course of action, or certainly a course of action. But I mean, once you can, I'm sure based on what you said, you get 4 of your colleagues to put this to a motion, and that would give Mr. King the authority to give a warning order to the committee, and they would then contact you all, and maybe their next meeting they could begin this process.
Thank you so much, Mr. City Manager and Mr. King. Do any other council members have any questions or comments on this matter? Councilmember Gardner.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I totally agree with staff and Mr. King's and both he and the city manager's comment, and where we have some resources available there, and then you can continue to have the input and the oversight and involvement, and then having a team that really wants to do it as well. This is something as Mr. King mentioned, they are always asking for projects. And I think also the chair, if I'm correct, the chair lives in District 4, correct?
You are correct.
Okay, yes. So, yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Gardner. Do any other council member have any comments? Councilmember Hawkins.
This is more of a comment, not a question. I just want to make sure to really implore the Economic Development Committee to work as best as it can with the community in finding some pathways forward and creating some understanding with regards to revitalization in District 4.
Mr. Hawkins, that's exactly what they did in Old Bowie. We are going to turn first, I'm sure, to the members of council who have strong connections to identify for us the stakeholder groups to make sure we haven't overlooked somebody there. So we'll get it going very well.
Is there a general consensus that this is a...
Topic to be taken up.
All right, fine.
We need a motion.
No, I don't need that. No.
All right, thank you, Mr. City Manager. All right, I'll move forward to agenda item E, which is the topic of discussion is economic development roundtable / working group. This is also another agenda item that I placed on the agenda. Essentially, what the objective of this agenda item was and is at this time, and then I'll also turn it over to staff, was the City of Bowie to host an economic development roundtable discussion with existing developers, specifically shopping center owners that are based within the City of Bowie. The goal of this discussion would be to focus on the lines of communication and strengthen the partnership between the City of Bowie, shopping center owners, business owners, and city officials to establish accountability and synergy on the desired direction of Bowie's economic development. The roundtable discussion would include identifying areas in Bowie primed for revitalization, like existing shopping centers, and a good example of this could be Pointer Ridge Shopping Center. I'm going to keep talking about District 4 council member. Like Pointer Ridge Shopping Center. Another example is the Bowie-based Ox Stadium. Those are good examples. Essentially, in this discussion, we would learn drivers behind the changing industry trends for economic development, retail business models, nationwide strategies, and priorities of the developers, and also make it very clear to the shopping center owners the priorities of the City of Bowie as well. So I am proposing that we host a roundtable discussion / working group with targeted, identified shopping center owners, businesses, and city council to focus on these objectives. So at this time, I'll turn it over to staff to see if you have any questions, comments, or councilman. Before I turn over to staff, let me just turn over to Councilmember Gardner for quickly.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I believe that would be greatly helpful, what she's promoting and suggesting, being that maybe if we pull together some of these local shopping center owners, local retail stores and outlets, just pulling those together, addressing some of these vacant stores issues, maybe finding out how we could be more helpful to the shopping center owners and finding good quality tenants, bringing in stores other than, no disrespect, but beauty supply shops and working with them other than bringing in tobacco shops, maybe bringing in healthy food options like a Chopped, a Sweet Greens, those sort of things. We have to be proactive because we are really falling slightly behind. You know, it's nice to see some of our current buildings being repurposed, like the former Capital One Bank over in Collington Station, where it's being repurposed for a KFC. Nice. That is, because I don't like to see vacant, empty buildings, but it would have been nice if we could have gotten a Chopped there or another type of store there. So what I'm hearing from Mayor Pro Tem and Devamadu is like, maybe if we pull all of those retail shopping center owners under our roof here, having them all in one room and saying, what is it that you need from us to help attracting better, higher quality, sustainable better quality products and services and retailers to Bowie? What could we do to help you fill your shopping centers? And that's just one of the items, because there are a number of items that we like to discuss with them. Code enforcement, making sure that these shopping centers are well lit, clean, that they're safe, the markings are there, the street, everything, just a number of things, issues. Maybe if we have them here under our roof and having these conversations, then we can working to making some improvements for all of Bowie. So if I'm correct, is that what I'm hearing from you?
Basically.
Okay.
Thank you so much for that added context, Councilmember Gardner. I'll, hold on, before I turn it over to Mr. Henry, I know that Mayor Adams is off mute. Mayor Adams, did you want to add to the presentation?
I think you covered it very well between yourself and Councilmember Gardner. I think it is about having that cooperative discussion about what is and what isn't working, what we can and do, and it gives us an opportunity as well, particularly from an economic development standpoint, to talk to them. We talk about retention, but we also want to do growth within those economic areas. So I think it's a good idea. I think it provides us a forum to really hear and to provide feedback to the community, to hear exactly what our business community feels and what they believe is working, but also for us to hear what isn't. So I agree. I look forward to seeing how we can move forward with this.
Thank you, Mayor Adams. At this time, I'll turn it over to John Henry.
Again, I'll start with a question. Is this something you expect to have happen within 30 or 60 days? Is this something that you're looking forward to having set up for summer? How soon do you envision this coming together?
I think we're open on the timeline. I don't think there's a specific deadline date that we have in mind at this time. Do you have any recommendations?
Well, again, I'm working on this. Again, this fits clearly in the ballpark you set up for the Economic Development Committee to play in. Timing-wise, about half our shopping center owners don't live in Bowie. And we're not talking they live down in Waldorf or someplace like that. We're talking they don't live even in Maryland or the DMV. So it would take some time for them, if they even were willing to accept an invitation, to find a time when we can get many of them here. So that rules out things like May. They've got other things in their industry that they do in May. They have other things they do in their industry in December. We prefer not to do meetings in December because we found, you as council, we as staff, that makes it difficult for our citizen participation. They are likewise parts of the summer. So that said, again, is this something you would consider tasking your Economic Development Committee with?
Mayor
Adams?
I think one of the things I would say and ask the question is, number one, I don't think, and I'll let council, everyone kind of chime in, that it has to be everyone's in person. I understand that there are those who are around the country in other areas and would not be able to travel or see it economically feasible to travel here, but we could look at including them with Zoom or something, or with Teams. I think the other part is you probably would look at having their executive leadership that is over the properties here or who manage to be a part of that conversation as well, and maybe have them being a part. So I think I don't believe we can possibly get all the quote owners here, but if we can't have them engaged or have a representative engaged for them at a level that we may still be able to get those answers, I think you may not have to put that off that far until next year. But looking at something that the committee could look to bring those people together to see their availability and go from there.
Mayor Pro Tem, what I think we ought to do here is if the council wants us to work this up, and I think maybe John Henry and the chairman of our Economic Development Committee can spend a few weeks working on a plan, so that that takes the what we see as our situation, mission, concept, and how we're going to put it out, lay it out in a few pages, and bring it back to the council for a second look here. And so here's the plan of action, and that gives him an opportunity to talk to the chairman of the Economic Development Committee and to sit down with them and sit down himself and work a plan and see what this would cost us, and what the venue would be, and to look at the technical requirements associated with it, and come back in April and said, okay, here's the plan for a roundtable discussion, and also give them an opportunity to see who does live in Bowie, and who we can invite, local executives who could come and talk to us, and also work on a venue and all the things that are necessary. But we need a few weeks to work on a plan, and I think we can do it, and have something you all can look at, and we can put some dollar figures to also.
Mr. Mayor?
I think that's a great, I think that's a great plan moving forward, and kind of what I guess that was sort of the expectation. So, but that's great, yeah. To come back, have a plan. Some of my comments were just to give ideas of some of the things we could look at to make it work. But yeah, that sounds good. Coming back in April, give everybody a chance to look at it, summarize it, actually think it through on what would be the most effective way, as you say, have a plan, have a mission, and go forward from there.
I agree. Do any other council members have any questions or comments before we move forward?
I do very briefly.
Councilmember Steph?
Thank you. I think two things. I think one, we need to probably gear this conversation so that's a little bit more balanced between us talking to commercial owners about what their needs are. If the goal is just gather a bunch of shopping center owners in a room and ask a bunch of pre-prepared questions about why we don't have more kavahs, they're going to walk away from that meeting thinking, well, that's a really cute group of uninformed city council members, and their impression of us won't be good. I do think we need to focus on understanding better what their needs are. I don't think we're going to learn anything new, because business owners have been telling us for years what their needs are. Give us lower taxes, a county permitting office that functions, lower crime, and customers willing to spend more money on our stuff. But we may well uncover some needs. And I think if we approach this from a spirit of we want to better understand what the city and county could be doing, I think we really need to document that and also make sure that the county's a part of the conversation, because I guarantee you that 90% of their challenges are not going to be related to us. They really are when we do talk to business owners. But just kind of approach it in a spirit of learning more from some of these folks what they really need.
Thank you, Councilmember Steph. I think those are great comments. Councilmember Truesdale?
Yes, I would just like to just kind of make a comment on, the level of getting the analytics from small businesses, owners, if not even getting the shopping plaza owners in, I think the voice really comes from the businesses that are in the shopping center. And if we can allocate, that conversation, it would be beneficial. I really think in terms of revitalizing, reinvesting in your businesses, that is so important. We just had the presentation with the gas station with Dash In, and I was impressed in terms of the level of reinvestment. So it's all about, it's a lot to do with experiencing, the customers want experiences. So that really comes from, the ground level, and being a part of the committee, the economic committee for some time prior, I know we have strong soldiers and boots on the ground ready to move. So I think it's a great opportunity to balance, to bridge everything.
Thank you, Councilmember Truesdale. Do any other council members have any comments? Okay, awesome. Before I move forward, I just want to recapture, I think I'm hearing 3 points, and I just want to make sure that staff is on the same page here. With Councilmember Estev's thoughts, it's really understanding the needs of a lot of these shopping center owners / developers, whatever they're calling themselves. That's one part of the conversation. The second part that Councilmember Truesdale pointed out was understanding the perspective of small business owners when it comes to aiding in revitalization and occupying these shopping centers, essentially what their needs are or trends that are associated there as to what attracts them to want to even come to these shopping centers. And then I think the third part that I'm hearing is us really, or at least I'm adding in there, is us really articulating our strategic priorities or re-articulating, because I know that we've done a great job doing that, but also re-articulating so that they can understand and give them a forum to ask questions around our priorities, our strategic direction, and what we would like to see economic development-wise in the city of Bowie. I think that's the 3 parts of the conversation, and I think the last piece, in terms of the participant list, you did a great job outlining who would need to be there. City Manager Lott also emphasized that. I think I would also support Councilmember Estev's addition on including Councilmember Watson in this conversation as well, and anybody else that she recommends from a county perspective to be invited to this conversation as well. So now I'll turn to City Manager Lott. Do you need a vote from us, or do you have the concurrence from council to move forward with coming back to us with a plan in April? Or some figures or details?
Well, I think there are at least 4 of you that support this. I don't need to vote. We're going to work on a plan, come back, bring it to you, and then we'll tweak it at that point, and we'll have more specifics about locations, money, and everything else we need to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager Lott. That sounds good. And I'll also just add, just really briefly on this agenda item, I think this is a really, really important discussion, especially when we heard about some of the comments from certain residents earlier this evening about the types of businesses, the investment in Bowie, the economic development direction, and what we'd like to see in our community. So I think this is really, really important. I don't want to say in response to those comments, but just aiding in the direction and just making sure that we're being proactive as a city council. So thank you so much, city staff, for that. I'll move on to the last agenda item, which is agenda item F. This is also another agenda item that I placed on the city council agenda. And essentially, I'll give you brief background on this agenda item, and then I will make some amendments here to the original format of this agenda item. Essentially, we all know that March is Women's History Month, or International Women's History Day, Women's History Month. And so as the only woman on council, what I was proposing was a Women's History Month celebration and reception, essentially where each council member would be able to nominate a female leader within the city of Bowie and be able to recognize their efforts and contribution to our community and everything that they have done or that they're doing to move things forward in the world, honestly. I think when we talk a lot about gender equity and we talk about equality for women's rights, I think it's really, really important to continue to encourage women to continue to keep going forward, fighting, and also blazing trails. And so essentially, the premise of this agenda item was for us to host a small reception prior to a council meeting, present the identified celebrants with proclamations that the city council would issue to them to acknowledge their efforts. And I also think an important part of this, we talk a lot about community in the city of Bowie. I think it's very, very important to foster this type of community. When you talk about a reception for women, bringing people together so that they can also formulate great partnerships, get to know each other, continue to encourage each other to keep going forward. This is what the city of Bowie is. We talk a lot about our activism population and how our residents are so engaged. And we want to make sure that as they continue to be engaged, we continue to honor their efforts and recognize their efforts to encourage them to continue to keep going forward. So essentially, The way that it was proposed on this council agenda was to host a short reception on March 20th from 7 to 8 p.m. and acknowledge identified women who would be recognized by City Council for their impacts across the city. Each council member would be able to propose a woman that would be recognized. They could be a city staff employee, they could be a business leader within the city of Bowie, or they could just be a city of Bowie resident that is just doing great things out there in the world and blazing trails. The reception was inspired by the Honorable Sheila Tillerson Adams, because she has been a great trailblazer and just recently retired and made so many impacts across Prince George's County. This event would be called Honoring Women Trailblazers, in also honor of the Honorable Sheila Tillerson Adams. Essentially, the reception would be sponsored by two Bowie restaurants, and so two of our Bowie restaurants here in the city would sponsor this reception, so that would not equal cost from the city to pay for food, which is probably a good bulk of portion of the cost. And that's also a way for us to promote the businesses that are in our city, for them to be philanthropically engaged, and for them to also invest in our community as well by giving them an opportunity to be spotlighted and honor these women as well. So essentially, they would provide small bites to help promote their businesses and also celebrate the recognized women. Yeah, that was pretty much the gist of it. Before I turn it over to staff, the only thing that I would add is, since putting this on the council agenda, I've had an opportunity to talk to staff and got some great recommendations from staff. So the amendment that I'd like to propose before we even move forward with the discussion is not essentially holding this on the 20th of March, and looking at holding this possibly in May, and making it a more structured and organized event to also give time to staff to properly plan something and also bring it back to us. And I get the two businesses that would sponsor this event more engaged and just be a little bit more proactive. I do admit I did want to do something pretty quickly for Women's History Month to recognize women, to continue to encourage them, but I also recognize, since this is a Trailblazers event, it wouldn't necessarily need to be rushed or need to happen on the 20th. And so at this time, I'll turn it over to staff. The other amendment that I'd also make to this is to set up a working group to properly plan the event with the great recommendation of staff, and then also add in factors to consider possible budget and cost, and then give city council members more time to be able to put forth nominations or women that would be honored, allow time to advertise this on the city website, allow time for staff to go through rental requirements, work with the restaurant on, the types of food that they would be providing, and then any setup or breakdown or custodial presence, parking, and set up the proclamations. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Sally to see if you have anything that you'd like to add before I turn it over to council members for discussion.
So, thank you. For those out in TV land, I'm Sally Hine. I'm the Director of Community Services here for the City of Bowie. And I did speak to the councilwoman, the Mayor Pro Tem, a little bit ago today with, we're happy to do, staff's happy to provide whatever service we're directed to do from council. Doing this event in 2 weeks was a pretty much impossibility from my perspective to do it well. So what we're doing, we hope to be able to do, is to get a little time, get together with whomever the council representative is going to be, if you decide we're going to do this, and then meet with whomever the vendors are in the community, the food vendors, find out exactly what we want to do, how big, how small you want this to be, come up with a date. Each of you has a role in it, as the Mayor Pro Tem has said, that each one would select a person from the community to nominate. We would need time to get information about these individuals. If you've looked at the city's webpage, we already have a Women's History webpage in there with biographies of other famous women in the world, and books that they have written and so on. So we would probably work with that webpage to expand upon it some. But it takes no less than a half a dozen different departments in the city, really, to pull off something like this. Some of that time, obviously, is during the workday. Other time would have to be in the evening. So we're just looking for your direction as to where you want us to go, and we'll work with you in any way we can. I would suggest, again, if you want to do it next year during Women's History Month, that's easy enough to do. We'd have a year to prepare for that. This one, I do think, needs a bit of a delay. And perhaps we could even consider something as an indoor-outdoor affair. We do have a patio out back on the other side of, as you're leaving the council chambers, that we don't use for much, but we've been talking about expanding. So if the weather was nice, it could be kind of an indoor-outdoor event. So any questions you have, I'm happy to try to answer them. And if you decide you're going to do this, we'll pull together a team, and we just need to have at least one representative from council that'll understand, be able to tell us what it is your vision is on all of this.
Well, Mayor Pro Tem, I do have a couple of questions. Have we identified the restaurants already?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Councilmember Gardner?
Yes, I'll share those. I can share those at that time.
Okay, well, great. That was one question.
Yes, we have, and they have agreed.
So we're prepared to plan this and work on this, especially if we can get something in May. What date did you prefer, you recommend, Sally?
I can leave that. I'll leave that to staff to make a recommendation there.
Sally, did you have a?
I'm sorry, I didn't come prepared to give you a date tonight. So once we meet with the council representative and we take a look at the city calendar, make sure we don't do it on the same night as the education awards program or scholarship awards program. We do a lot of these here. But I'm sure we can come up with a date in May that would be, acceptable to both parties. Probably, I'm thinking mid-May. The parade and the Bowie Fest come at the end of May, beginning of June, so I'm thinking sometime mid-May, May 15th, thereabouts.
Well, Mayor Pro Tem, with regard to this particular event, I would need a vote and a motion, second, and vote, and because this would involve additional FTEs and hours and possible overtime. And this will be a new event that's not currently in the budget. So, but if, with that, we can take the mission and plan it for, and then let you all know. We'll work with you all and set the date and then set all the wheels in motion for the latter part of May for this event.
Thank you, City Manager Lott. At this time, do any members of council have any questions? Council member Steph?
Yeah, I do have one suggestion. If we're doing awards and recognitions, I think one of the things we found over time is that it's often better to leave the decision of who gets special recognition up to an existing city committee, and they can make those recommendations on the basis of fixed criteria. I think when council starts picking awardees, we start getting into a lot of trouble with perception issues about favoritism. But because this is an identity-based issue, the diversity committee very much, this is in their wheelhouse, and would probably be best positioned to take that on for us if they wanted to come up with some clear criteria for how they wanted to recognize women in particular, and they could accept applications and make a decision. We still, in almost all these cases, have final say over approving or rejecting a particular awardee, but I think it might make it, it might save us a little bit of reinventing the wheel by having diversity take that on.
Thank you, Councilmember Steph. Do any other city council members have any questions or comments?
Just a quick comment. I think that's an excellent idea about expanding it. We may get some broader, more diverse participants in the process. And if we get something where we have a committee that can take in applications from across the city, from different areas, whether it's business or education or what have you, kind of span the spectrum, I think that may be a good alternative.
Thank you, Councilmember Wolfley. Do any other?
Yes, I do.
Councilmember Gardner?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. From what I'm hearing, and I wanted to share this with our colleagues, what I'm understanding is this is not, and no disrespect to the Diversity Committee and the role that they play in our decision-making and our policies and things. It's my understanding that this was an event in recognition from the council itself, not more or less the committee. So I understand, if I'm correct, it is a individual council member that they're asking, for instance, from your shop yourself. So, for instance, my being Councilmember Gardner, I would identify an individual woman that has made an impact here in the city of Bowie. I understand the role of the diversity committee, but from what I'm hearing is that this is from my shop as an individual counselor. And I hear what you're saying as to where you can find yourself getting in some kind of some trouble, but hey, you know, trouble comes with the job. But I could definitely support Mayor Pro Tem's direction on this, to where it's coming from an individual council member as opposed to the diversity committee and going through that process of them appointing or of pulling someone else out. I wanted to make a slight alteration or to where maybe if everyone would, maybe my person, for instance, that I may want to honor is not a physical resident in the city of Bowie. However, she has made an impact for multiple residents here in the city of Bowie for the greater. So that is someone who I would want to honor. That's just me personally, as wanting to support that woman. So I hear what my colleagues are saying from handing it over and utilizing a diversity committee, but this is something that's coming from this body here saying we recognize these individuals.
Thank you, Councilmember Gardner. Councilmember Estef?
So all of our awards and honors officially come from the city and are signed by the mayor, but the vast majority of them are chosen by a committee in order to depoliticize the process. My concern, based especially on the feedback that we had following the proposed reception last week, is I think a lot of residents are going to have a hard time not seeing this as an opportunity for us to use their tax dollars to basically have dinner with our friends. I think we have to depoliticize the process.
And this isn't political at all. We're recognizing the fine works of many of the great women that have made great strides here in the city of Bowie. And sometimes the committees aren't aware of those. We each have relationships that have with individual women in our community that have made positive change or impact to our community. So we want to recognize them. I totally hear what you're saying and where the politics, and you could get into, but this isn't the case. And for the sake of it, because we didn't want that appearance to where we're using city dollars, this is why we thought to bringing in community partners, and to where not, well, these communities partners stepped up and said this is something that they too want to do, and supporting and recognizing the works of women here within our community.
Thank you, Councilmember.
And as Ms. Hines mentioned earlier, I think that maybe what we should consider doing is making this an annual sort of event, and tasking the diversity committee going forward with this role, to where we can have this as an annual event ongoing, because we should recognize the works of women and what they've done here in our city. I mean, we all come from women, and it's women who continue to manage and take care of everything. And I appreciate women greatly, and I want to recognize all the fine work that you do. And I thank you for picking that up.
Thank you, Councilmember Gardner. Do any other colleagues have any comments or questions? Councilmember Estef?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with us encouraging any particular applicants we know to apply, but I do think the process needs to remain apolitical. When we start getting the business of, hosting public receptions on, using taxpayer resources, even if a business is providing the money, as staff has said, they're having to spend their time and their effort and taxpayer dollars to plan and host this. I do think that that needs to be depoliticized as much as possible. And if we want to encourage people to apply, that's great. But let's have the diversity committee or one of our existing committees have a clear, well-established list of criteria. We can encourage folks to apply, but then they pick, 2 or 3 that they honor, and go from there.
Thank you, Councilmember Estef. Councilmember Gardner, do you have another comment that you would like to briefly add?
Yes, I'll be brief and as in, and eloquent. Pardon me if I may ask our staff this question. Why didn't the diversity committee pick this up? I understand that there was a reason why they didn't pick this up, Women's History Month, as a I don't know why.
Well, we do have something's been posted on our website. I don't know. I'd have to ask the chairman of that committee as to
Yeah.
why this has not been an annual event. It has
That's
not
not
been
good.
since the 7 years, I'm in my 7th year here, believe it or not.
Yeah, 7
God
yeah,
help me. But it hasn't been a specific issue or celebration event since, but
And that's not good. I would have hoped that our diversity committee would have picked it up, but being now that they haven't done it, this time, the first one, I believe that the council, working with staff, can handle this and recognizing women, and then going forward from there, the diversity committee can take it from there.
So they did have, I believe, last year, Women's History Month. And this year, they elected to do Irish American History Month, I believe, you know?
Okay.
So, I mean, it's not always the same one. There's multiple things that are honored each month, I guess.
Yes.
And that was one that was developed last year, the webpage. That's why the webpage actually already exists.
Yes.
It just wasn't the one that they honed in on for this year, and I believe they're going to make a presentation to you guys on the next council meeting about the one that they are recommending, or that they are talking about for this month.
For this month, their diversity committee's event that they're planning for this month.
Right.
Okay, for heritage.
It's Irish Heritage Day.
Irish Heritage.
And
Okay.
I don't believe for any of their months, they do a big event. They do a page on the website, and they also come to the council meeting and make a
Yes, and make a formal
presentation to you. I think
presentation.
we had Pan American Month a month or
Yes.
two ago, and so it's,
I'd like to see, and my colleagues, and going forward, if we work with the diversity committee and maybe putting a line item there for ongoing permanent event recognizing Women Histories Month here in the city of Bowie. I think that it is something that we really strongly should consider doing. We definitely should do that. That should be something that should be without a doubt.
Thank you, Councilmember Gardner. We can approach that in April during the budget cycle.
Thank you, Ms. Hines.
Thank you, staff. I mean, the only thing that I'd like to add before we entertain a motion, and just bear in mind with my colleagues, I just want to say you can make the motion whichever way you desire to make the motion. So I just want to add, I want to remove the conception or the thought process that was thrown in there that this could be seen as a way to spend taxpayer dollars to host a reception with friends. And I'm not saying, and I want to honor what you were saying, Councilmember Stev, but I just want to strip that perception away from the process, because I think based on the feedback that we received during the last council hearing, and I also will speak on this because I removed that item from the agenda, this is a way to, one, take more burden off of city resources by inviting community partners. And I do believe that it is my belief that as leaders, we do have a responsibility to inspire community and recognize and promote and continue to encourage people to keep going. And so as much as I am hopeful and love the fact that the Diversity Committee can continue this going forward, and I hope that they will, part of why this was not proposed this year for the Diversity Committee to take this on is because of the timing. Because, I mean, honestly, it's a miss on our part that we don't already do this, because Women's History Month is a thing that has been happening for how many decades? And so because we are not doing this, because I am the only woman on council, and because I believe that it is important for women to be recognized, this is why it's being proposed this way for this year. And going forward, that process can be a little bit more institutionalized, a little bit more distributed, and include many more partners. But I think for right now, as a council member, it is my opinion at this time, just came to my mind, if you would like to abstain from nominating an individual forward to not have political additions in the process, you're welcome to do so. And I think if other council members want to move forward and recognize a woman, because yes, as council members who are very and actively engaged in our community, there are just going to be efforts that we are going to know about that the Diversity Committee is not going to know about at this time, because there isn't enough time to properly promote. I mean, our engagement's not that high. We have 6,000 subscribers. Realistically, to get this out to the community from a diversity committee perspective, to get the certain level of awareness to field application, it just takes a lot more effort, and we just don't have that. Our infrastructure is not set up that way at this time. So I think for the purposes of this particular event, I welcomed staff's recommendation on pushing the timeline back, which is completely fine with me, but I do think that it's important as council members who are immersed in the community, who feel comfortable to be able to nominate somebody for them to be recognized based on the efforts that we know of today. And the diversity committee can also recommend those people as well. They don't have to abstain for participating in the process. So those are my comments. Those would be my suggestions. If you'd like to not participate, that's fine as well. I do think that the way that it is proposed is equitable for the circumstances in which we find ourselves for today. But I do honor your comments. I honor your perspective. I think it is a valuable one. I think it's a great recommendation, but I don't agree with it at this time based on our infrastructure, respectfully. Does any other council members have any comments? Councilmember Steph?
Sure. So I appreciate the comments. I guess my question is, what's the urgency then? If we're already in Women's History Month and we want to do this properly, why not simply give staff the directive to work with the Diversity Committee to do this next year? There's lots of other identity months that we don't recognize. We only just started doing a proclamation for Pride last year, and we've never done an event for that. So, I mean, it feels like there's lots of identities if you look hard enough. And so I'm fine with us doing any recognitions we want, but this doesn't strike me as having like a Women's History Month emergency. You know what I mean? We could give this a year if we want to do this properly in a year's time.
I definitely, thank you so much for your comments, Councilmember Esteve. I can't speak to the past of why people did not bring forth different identities that they wanted to recognize. I can't speak on that. However, being the only woman that's sitting on this body today, I do feel like there's an urgency given where we are with gender equity. Now, you're welcome to disagree with that, and that's fine, but this is my perspective. I placed on the agenda. You could vote no if you'd like, or you can support it. However, I see the urgency from a gender equity perspective of where we are in our universe today to recognize, encourage, and continue to honor women at this time. Now, if it is your recommendation and you'd like to make a motion to go forward and look at this for next year, that's completely fine, and I welcome that as well. But at this time, I'm recommending that we move forward with it this year. Thank you. Would you like to make a comment? Councilmember Steph?
Yeah, Women's History Month is great. We're already in it. We kind of waited a little bit late to do it this year. And I think the public perception is going to be, especially if we are throwing a public reception on taxpayer dollars with staff time, and we're the ones choosing who's being honored, I think it's going to be very, very, very hard to really answer that perception that our residents are going to have, especially in an election year.
Thank you, Councilmember Esteve, for your comments. I want to remove the taxpayer dollar aspect of it. I respectfully disagree with that. I think the bulk of the cost is absorbed by the businesses who are providing the food. Staff, essentially the way that this agenda item is proposed, would come in and out, not even come in, it would be held from 7 to 8 right before a council hearing. If we wanted to do it on a separate day, that's completely fine, and I think staff would have to look at that and come back to us with that proposal, but the way that it's currently presented is that it would essentially possibly be done before a council hearing, an hour before, for an hour, and those community partners would be invited. I don't want to turn this into a public debate going back and forth on because clearly we have a difference in opinion, and that's completely fine. I respect yours, and I still obtain mine. But I'd like to move forward. If you'd like to make a motion to propose that, feel free, that's fine. But essentially the way that it's proposed today is what it is now. Councilmember Wolfley, would you like to make a comment?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I don't think we can bifurcate the costs, taxpayer cost. It's employees doing their job. And so that's, if we direct them to do that, that's what we're doing. We're using taxpayer money for that. That's unambiguous. Whether or not they're paying for the food or not is another question. But we're going to have half a dozen groups doing a bunch of work on it. So regardless of what we, would like it to look like, the fact of the matter is it still looks like we have a, and it is, in fact, being supported by the organization. And so that's, it just can't be simply, wished away like that. And I do have serious concerns about a narrow interpretation of who gets honored. And that's my concern, because I think that something like this warrants the broadest possible consideration and it might be beyond my social circle, or yours, or the next person, that we may find some of the finest people we've never met who've made some truly meaningful contributions to the community, to women's history, or what have you, and we just aren't privy to having met them. And it's that sort of opportunity that when you have a properly advertised, properly reviewed and considered, recommendations made to us for us to approve and consider, and to make it indeed a decision of the council, and carries that weight of being selections that we all agree are meaningful contributors to the community. So that's one of my main concerns.
Thank you, Councilmember Wolfley. I'm just going to go to Councilmember Gardner really quickly here.
Yes.
I'll just say one thing before I do that. I just want to add in, I hear you, and I think those are valid and great points, completely. I also want to just be mindful that, as somebody that's worked in technology for years, our social engagement strategy is already what it is. And so when you speak on proper engagement or proper advertising, that yield and those numbers are not high anyways. So even if we, what I'm saying is the suggestion is not going to yield the outcome that you think it will because of our engagement numbers where they are today. And those engagement numbers are just what they are. They're undeniable. It's not subjective. And so I hear you, but I don't think that solves the problem that you're looking to solve for. I think that's more of a long-term thing that essentially we'll probably get into in the budget cycle. And then the other thing I'm just going to respectfully disagree with, I think it's very convenient when council members use this narrative of taxpayer dollars and throw that out there, and it riles up the community in a way that's just, I think, very misdirected. And I think, I don't want to say abusive, but to a degree, kind of, because I think hosting a community-like event for Women's History Month and tying it to this narrative of taxpayer dollars, it's just promoting a narrative that's just unfair around garnering community gatherings. And so we do community gatherings all the time. Do we sit here and have a discussion and a debate on misuse of taxpayer dollars? I mean, us going back and forth could be viewed as a misuse of taxpayer dollars because we're still sitting here and it's almost 10:30 at night and council and staff is here too. So I just want to really separate that for a second, because it really bothers me as an elected official and as a leader when people always harp on taxpayer dollars in misdirected directions when there are other things that we are doing that are not really yielding an ROI to taxpayer dollars currently in our practices. So I just feel like that's an unfair categorization. I respect your opinion, I welcome your opinion, but I just disagree with it. I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Gardner and then entertain a motion.
Well, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Ndevimadu, and I took in and absorbed everything I've heard this evening, and I appreciate all of the dialogue that we received. And I do believe that everyone recognizes the attempt of this council to recognize the importance of women in our community. And I'd like to enter a motion to direct staff for the month of May to put together a reception and inviting residents from the city of Bowie, recognizing women who've made history for the city of Bowie and its residents. And I'd like to get a second on that.
There's a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. I'm assuming, just a quick question for staff. Is this the part where we do discussion? Okay. Any discussion?
Yes, I'd like to offer an amendment specifically clarifying that the Diversity Committee would be setting the parameters on who is honored, what the application criteria is, and that anyone, including members of the council, could make nominations for the award, but that it simply be the Diversity Committee who are making a determination about who is being recognized.
like that for going forward, but not today for the sake of time, just getting it done. Yeah. So, no, I don't want to accept that amendment.
Is there a second on the amendment, though?
Yes, I had a.
Second.
Is there a second on the amendment?
Just a quick pause. City Manager Lott, he offered an amendment. The amendment was not accepted at this time. What is the proper course of action?
Do for a second his amendment.
He seconded his amendment.
The motion, there's a motion to amend the main motion. It has a second, correct?
No.
Yes, there's a second for there's a second for the amendment to the main motion.
So then
Hold on,
that
hold on.
amendment gets voted on,
The main motion was, there was a second for the main motion.
and then there's a
then
motion to amend
Then there was a
that's been
motion.
seconded. You vote on that first, and then you go back to the main motion.
Okay.
Got you. Okay. All right, so the amendment has been moved and properly seconded. All in favor to the amended motion, please say aye at this time.
Aye.
All opposed, same favor? Nay.
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 Mayor Adams, you're frozen on the screen, so I don't know how you're voting at the moment.
Can you hear us?
Mayor Adams?
I don't know if he can hear us. There might be some difficulties.
Looks like he is
So,
perhaps having technological
so
difficulties.
taking Mayor Adams out of this, since he will not be able to vote for whatever reason, can we have just a show of hands so I could make sure for the yays? Okay, and then for the nays?
Nay.
Okay, thank you.
Alrighty, so I'll go back to the original motion that has been on the floor at this time. The original motion has been moved and properly second. All those in favor, please say
Sorry, I
aye.
would like to offer another amendment.
Councilmember Steph?
Yes, I would like to request that the honoree must be a resident of the city of Bowie.
Second.
We'll
No,
move to
no.
discussion at this
No,
time.
I'm sorry, no, I can't accept that. Let me explain, I need to explain.
Councilmember Gardner?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Endeavor Madu. I am explaining the person that I would want to honor and bring forward lives outside of the city of Bowie, but her program feeds multiple residents within the city of Bowie, and without giving additional information on the person that I'm honoring, it's a travesty that she doesn't live in the city of Bowie today. And perhaps someday, with the process of annexation, she may, but she does not. But the people that she support, all of them live within the incorporated municipality of the city of Bowie.
Thank you, Councilmember Gardner. I just also would like to offer brief comments. Essentially, the program, the way that it was proposed, was that you were a city staff member. Some of our city staff does not live within the city of Bowie, so you could be a city staff member, you could be a community or business owner within the city, or a resident of Bowie, or essentially work within the city. So that was the original, that was the original proposal of the program.
So they must
Councilmember
be
Staff?
a city employee, an owner of a business within the incorporated city limits, or a resident.
Not incorporated city limits. Like, for example, let me give you a brief example. If we're honoring a professor at Bowie State University and have Bowie State residents that go to Bowie State University, that would not be fair because then they wouldn't meet the criteria, technically. So doesn't have to be incorporated Bowie, but there are many people who live within Bowie that are unincorporated areas that still impact the city of Bowie from an incorporated perspective.
So I take a different view. I don't think that there is a shortage of Bowie residents or incorporated Bowie female business owners for this particular award.
I appreciate your comments, Councilmember Esteve. Would you like to add any more?
No?
All right, thank you so much.
So, quick question.
Councilmember Wolfley?
So in that example, we have someone that works outside the city of Bowie.
No, work,
So works at Bowie State, lives outside the city of Bowie, and I'm not sure why we're calling this a,
that's a vague example. Please, let's not get tied up on the specific, it's just a vague example.
so what is the criteria for being worthy of being
Having an impact to the city of Bowie.
Impact to the greater good of Bowie residents. Be it you a Bowie resident or be it that you're not, but you have improved the lives of someone in Bowie. Or somehow this is why we are recognizing this woman because of her history of what, or her herstory of what she's made as a contribution to the betterment of Bowie, the community.
and we would decide that on our own.
This time around.
You can,
but
and
going
if
for-
you
could,
feel
if you
comfortable,
choose
you don't have to participate
or
as well.
you may not choose to participate, but going forward, the diversity committee, I like to put something in stone to where the diversity committee does a reception ongoing for recognizing women history, women greatness.
Thank you, Councilmember Gardner. Councilmember Wolfley?
Yeah, just one quick comment. That the notion that I have the opportunity to not participate is not a acceptable alternative to disagreeing with the idea being a good idea. It is completely unrelated. The fact of the matter is I'm representing my constituents, and whether in my not participating is not necessarily an answer to somebody on whether or not we should be proceeding with a program like that. So to disinvite me is it. But it is.
Hold on, wait, what, Councilmember Gardner? Councilmember Gardner, let Councilmember
anyway,
Wolfley continue.
I think that's it's a disingenuous way to, toss aside a disagreement and to say, well, I'll take my ball and go home. This is more about a collaborative discussion about what the merits are for proceeding forward. I don't think anybody here in this council has a disagreement about the value of a recognition. It's in the logistics, and the logistics, my concerns about the logistics are the impact that it has not on me individually, but collectively, what it looks like for the organization as a whole, and the method in which we select people for this recognition. And that's my concern, and it's not to be, dismissed as oh, well, you don't have to play along. Because regardless, there is an appearance for the organization when we do take our name and our money and our time and our effort to do that. And I do think it's worth having the conversation. I'm sorry if it's too late for people. That's why we're here. That's why we're here this evening. It is a good use of taxpayer money to have the open dialogue right here.
Thank you, Councilmember Wolfley. I'd like to just clarify, and I'll just make a quick comment and move forward with the motion that's on the floor. I'm sorry that you feel that you've been disinvited to participate. That is not the intent, and that's not what was stated. Essentially, your recommendations were accepted going forward, but essentially, given the circumstances that we are in and the timing for this year, what we are saying is if those circumstances for the motion that's on the floor to be adopted are not appropriate at this time, we don't want you to feel pressured that you have to adopt something or participate something if you don't agree in the way that it's structured at this time. And so you're not disinvited. We welcome you. We know that you're representing your community, and we honor the representation that you have for your community. We're not